Hi,
Hey
Golan.
Steph. Hi Steph.
How are you? How was your long weekend?
Yeah, it was great. Great weather. Couldn't complain too much. And right now we're probably pulling a lot of people away from the TV screen for the US Open. I do not know. Probably losing a lot of tennis fans right now.
I know that's where
That's
Carrie Heinzel is right now. She's watching that for sure.
yeah. So there's a good one going on right now, like really tough.
Who's
That
So is
we're
playing right
that
now,
watching.
Golan?
I'm sorry?
Who's playing right now?
Fritz and Zverev, the German guy. So
Oh,
it's a really tight game, and it's a quarterfinal. So and the crowd is American, of course. So you can imagine the emotions that's going on over there. And it's a very good tournament so far. A lot of surprises,
yeah. So
but
it's
it's nice.
the you said the what open was it?
It's the U.S. Open. It's in New
Okay.
York right now. Yeah, one of the
and
major
the
events.
temperature is good for it too, because normally it's really hot during the U.S.
Right,
Open.
right. I
Yeah.
think they got lucky this time.
Yeah, for
Anyhow,
whatever reason, I never got to the
into
US
tennis.
Open or any of them. Yeah, tennis in general, but I can appreciate the stamina, the endurance. I started playing pickleball. If That's
Wow.
it's like the
Yeah.
baby version of tennis. So
It could
that's
be
all.
very challenging. It could be very challenging as well if you play it right.
And play a very um aggressive and skilled opponent for sure.
There you go. There you go.
Maybe that was part of the problem. My daughter recently played tennis, and she's really into sports, and she plays badminton and basketball and volleyball. And she was like, tennis is really hard. I didn't think it would be so hard. She came back like just covered in sweat and bright red face. And yeah, I was surprised at how fit she was, but she still found it very hard.
It's very
You-
deceiving.
Steph, I tried learning tennis and let's not even talk about how I did. But was pickleball any easier? Do you think I should give that a try and
I
feel
definitely,
better about myself?
yeah, I like pickle. The racket is lighter, the court is smaller. There's like little nuanced rules to it. But I just found like the distance running in tennis and the weight of the racket, the weight of the ball, it alleviates so much of that with pickleball. It's like a combination between table tennis and real tennis. That's what I like to think that it is. But
It's
no,
like
it's definitely
it's like table tennis, but you're playing while standing on the table.
yeah. I feel like I don't know if like Wii Sports. I feel like I'm playing Wii Sport tennis, but in real life. Like that's sort of kind
That's
of the
fun.
hybrid that I get from it.
Well, I hope the professional pickleballers are not listening. They will be offended by lightness the lightness of the game. Anyway,
100%. Yeah, it's nice to be able to get outside and to connect with other people. And we've had so many years. Thankfully, we're over that of the pandemic and being very isolated. So any chance that we get to try something new, to do something fun in a social setting, definitely try to jump on that opportunity.
for
But
sure.
yeah, so we have a really, really interesting topic today. Before we jump into some housekeeping, we'll let a few more attendees join. I just wanted to extend my gratitude to both of you, Jonathan and Golan, for joining us today. It is a very heavy topic. It can be quite difficult to talk about. So to have, you two professionals here, it's going to be really, really useful to our audience members. So I do see five on my screen. I'm just going to go over a couple little housekeeping things for all of our attendees, all of our viewers today. So thank you for joining. Thank you. Welcome to Family Law Now After Hours. Today, the topic that we're covering is domestic violence and legal protections. So you may notice that there is not a chat feature, but we do have a Q&A box. So please feel free to submit your comments, your questions there. The purpose of this series is to discuss general topics around separation, divorce, and other family law matters that may come up during the course of a family law case. So any information provided in this series should not be taken as legal advice. If you do have questions regarding your specific matter, please call our office or a lawyer in your area to book a consultation and to receive tailored guidance. Typically we have a little teaser. I will plug that today as well to make sure you stay tuned until the end. We do have an offer to share about how you might be able to, schedule a 20-minute free call with one of our lawyers. So just stay tuned for that. Now for some introductions. For those of you who don't know me already, my name is Stephanie Brooks. I've been immersed in family law for over 6 years now. My dedication to family law stems from my passion for assisting clients through what's a traditionally difficult time by approaching matters with empathy, integrity, and compassion. Over the course of my legal career, I've gained experience managing a diverse caseload with sensitive matters, negotiating practical solutions, and advocating for my clients both inside and outside of the courtroom. We also have Shanza on your screen today. Shanza is a dedicated family lawyer with a strong focus on compassionate and effective legal representation. Her background in business management enhances her strategic approach to legal matters. She excels in negotiation, achieving favorable settlements through strategic dialogue and strong advocacy for her clients. And she prioritizes clear communication, ensuring that clients are informed and empowered through the legal process. Joining us today, we do have Jonathan. Jonathan is a registered social worker and accredited family mediator who has 25 years of experience working in a variety of roles, including youth justice, education, child protection, and family law. He has been providing family law related services since 2006. And when he became, involved with the OCL. So for those of you who don't know, the OCL is the Office of the Children's Lawyer. And in 2019, Jonathan started his full-time private practice. Since then, he's provided a variety of services such as family court assessments, family mediation, collaborative family law, and psychotherapy for both children and adults. And last but not least, we have Golan. He is an associate family lawyer with our firm and a certified mediator with over 25 years of legal experience. He was first called to the bar in Israel in 1996 and then called to the bar in Ontario in 2003. Golan, as well as acting as a mediator, also has extensive experience representing clients through negotiation as well as trial work. So now that you know a bit more about us, we're just going to dive right on in. Domestic violence can be a very heavy topic, very sensitive topic, and maybe even difficult to navigate or to identify. So how can we recognize domestic violence? Shanza, I'm gonna, flip things over to you, recognizing its forms and those signs to look out for.
Thank you, Steph, and thank you, Jonathan and Golan, for joining us today. When you were asking me about forms of domestic violence, I think when we talk about it, one of the first things that come to mind is physical abuse, like hurting the other person, bodily harm. But there is so much more to domestic violence. An abusive relationship is not necessarily one that involves physical violence. Physical abuse is obviously one of the more noticeable ones, an injury, bruises. People can observe physical violence and call the police, intervene. But that's just one of the many forms of domestic violence. There's also other forms of abuse that can be equally traumatic and they can be sometimes hard to detect. There's mental abuse, there's emotional abuse. These type of abuses are mostly more subtle, but they can be just as damaging. How do you know that there is emotional or physical abuse? Well, there's verbal abuse, there's insulting behavior, threatening behavior, name calling, mocking. Gaslighting is a big one, making the victim doubt their own perception, denying facts, manipulating situations. I think isolation is just another example of emotional and mental abuse. You notice this in some relationships where there is a lot of control. Your partner can dictate your day-to-day life. They can limit your interactions with friends or families or social networks, which can lead to increased dependency on the abuser. So these are the two I would say in terms of like mental and physical. But there's also a third type that I think can be missed sometimes, which is financial abuse. This is where one person can exert control over another's financial resources, which can limit their ability to support themselves, which can make them really financially dependent on the other person. And how does it play out in real life could be things like controlling access to money. The abuser can restrict the victim's access to bank accounts, credit cards, making it nearly impossible for the person to manage their own finances. We see situations where the partners might prevent employment of their partner, not being supportive of their work, not having an independent income can really make the victim dependent on the abuser. There's also examples where financial dependency could be by refusing to contribute financially. Some people will run up debts in the other person's name or use their credit cards, which can limit self-sufficiency. And I think financial abuse can be especially harmful because it can make the victim really feel trapped with very few ways to leave the abusive relationship since they rely on the abuser for money and self-sufficiency. So abuse, like you made me talk about this, Stephanie, can come in many forms, right? And that can take a really serious toll on people. So it's really important to recognize these signs and kind of get help to break out of this cycle.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that was a great description, Shanza. I would just add one more category, is litigation abuse. Like some people will continue the abuse long after the couple has separated through the court system and just like constantly peppering them with nasty allegations and kind of using the legal justice system to attack and continue their abuse.
absolutely. And, I always tell my clients before entering into the litigation process that court can be very draining emotionally,
Mhm.
financially. It's a very heavy and difficult process to go through. So yeah, absolutely, Jonathan. Thank you for bringing litigation abuse up because it's very real. It's intimidating. Um, and
Yeah, there's a professor at Queen's by the name of Dr. Nick Balla, who's very
yeah,
famous in our world. Does a lot of really good research on family law topics, and he's actually currently doing a research project on litigation abuse. So that'll be interesting when that's all wrapped up and we get more information about that.
absolutely. That would be such a great resource to lean on and to get guidance through, for sure. And the legal protections that are available to recipients of this type of domestic abuse. If you're not already in the court system or you're not turning to the criminal court system, there are tools within the family realm, within the family courts to help protect you or your children from threats and from violence. So if you are fearful that your current or your former partner might harm you, might harm your children, you can seek a restraining order through the family courts, which will limit what someone can do, where someone can go, or who they can contact. So to apply for a restraining order, you would have to bring an application to start the court process. In your application, you can ask for more than just a restraining order. So if there are other family law issues that you want a judge to decide on or have input on, such as parenting, support, division of property, those are sort of topics for other webinars. But for a restraining order, if it's something you need and it's something that you need urgently, what you would want to look into is something called a motion, and you would bring this at the same time that you bring an application. A motion is a specific part of the legal process. It's a specific step where you want to ask a judge to decide an issue on a temporary and urgent basis. So, for example, your application as a whole might touch on child support, parental decision-making responsibility, But the urgency, what you need the court to take a look at and make a decision on immediately is this restraining order component. That's when you would bring the motion. And you'll have to tell the judge, the court, why you need a restraining order right away. So the application and the motion materials would need to be served or delivered to the other person, and so that they would be made aware that you're starting the application and that you're bringing a motion. Normally, and this is very, process information for our audience, but normally in the family court process, you can only bring a motion at a certain point in the litigation proceeding, and the other person would be made aware that you're asking for this motion. However, it's called a motion without notice. Those can be made for an urgent restraining order if, maybe you don't know where the other person is actually located. There's an immediate danger that you or your children are in, and you want to make sure that you're not harmed, or you're not giving the other person the opportunity to take those types of actions, because that may have serious consequences. So if you go through that process, if your matter is heard and if a temporary restraining order is made, typically there'll be an end date in place, whether it's a specific date or the date that you return to court for another hearing, the return of your motion. And then when you do that, the judge may either continue the temporary restraining order, they may make it final, or they may end it. It all depends on your circumstances, but that's sort of the legal protection or the legal avenue that you could take through the family court system. All that being said, it's really important to also consider, safety planning, strategies for leaving a dangerous situation safely, things that you can do maybe on your end when you're waiting for your matter to be heard, or you're getting your materials ready for the litigation proceeding. Jonathan, do you have any tips or any strategies that people can try to utilize to create and implement those safety protocols?
Yeah, so if you're living in a dangerous situation and you might need to leave, it's really, really important for you to come up with a safety plan of what you're going to do if your life is in danger, or if the abuse is going to continue, to have a quick and safe exit from that situation. So I would very strongly recommend, if anyone who's listening is living in that kind of circumstance, please get in touch with someone from a shelter or another service provider who has experience doing safety planning. They might be able to, so like a psychotherapist who has knowledge of family violence and domestic violence, or a women's shelter would be a good option, or victim services would be another good option if you're in Ontario. People who have experience doing safety planning will give you lots of tips that you may not think about, or may not even occur to you because you don't just have that experience. So again, just to emphasize, really important, if you're in that situation, please go reach out to someone. There's lots of free support available. Just Google it online, or go to your local women's shelter, or find a therapist. All those people would be able to help you. So some of the highlights might be having a grab and go bag full of essentials like underwear, toothbrush, cash, a cell phone that the abuser doesn't know about, toiletries. If you're a woman, you might need feminine products in there, tampons, maybe some supplies for children, maybe a little bit of extra medication if you have any important medication that you're taking. It might also be good to have important documents in there: birth certificates, passports, driver's licenses, SIM cards, whatever important information that you have. And to have that in a hidden place in your room, in your home, or maybe leave it with a neighbor or a friend, that if you have to go, you can just grab it and you don't have to worry about running around the house in danger, trying to pick things up that you need, or having to leave the house without those important supplies. So when, you know, when thinking about this, make sure that you do actually come up with a plan, because if you're in a dangerous situation, your brain is going to be in fight, flight, or freeze mode, and you may not be able to think about all the things you need to do to leave that room or that building or that home safely. So plan ahead so that your brain already knows what to do when you're in danger, and you won't have the risk of that fight, flight, or freeze erasing all the information that you need to think about in order to get out of there quickly. So other aspects of the plan might be telling someone about your plan. So it might be a parent, if you have a supportive parent, might be a friend, might be a coworker, it might be a neighbor that you trust, it might be a shelter worker, going to a shelter and getting help and letting them know, I might have to leave on this day because this and this is going to happen and I'm really worried about it. Coworkers might be able to help you out. Neighbors are often an important resource as well. Maybe you have a sibling that you can talk to about this. It's really, really important to know that when you're going through this, it's a lot. It's probably more than anything you've ever dealt with before. So get as much support and help as you want. No person is an island. We all need support in our life at some point. So it's really, really important to get help. There in Ontario, there is a lot of support for safety planning. So any women's shelter, like in my area, we have the YWCA shelter in Peterborough. We have Bethesda House in Oshawa. We have Cornerstone in Coburg. We have Women's Resources in Lindsay. There's a women's shelter and women's supports in every single jurisdiction in Ontario. I'm sure that's the same in other provinces as well. So reach out to your local support person and come up with a plan. And it can be helpful to write it down too. So I'm going to share with Steph a link that people can use. And you can actually download a safety planning form and kind of fill it out and just put all your important information and numbers and all that kind of stuff. I would encourage everybody to make sure that you have copies of your children's birth certificate, health cards, and any other important documents they have to make sure that you have that information as you go. So key takeaways, get support and come up with a plan if you're living in this situation, because it's really important. And if you are a professional that works with victims of family violence, then make sure that you know yourself about safety planning. You can refer them to someone who can help them come up with that plan.
Thank you, Jonathan. Yeah, that's a lot of great resources, different, in different jurisdictions within Ontario. And I really like, no one should be an island, really utilizing other people, your support system, whoever that may be, because it is a very, very hard space to navigate. And I'm sure very difficult to take that first step sometimes as well. So leaning on those people, your rocks, hopefully makes that first step, a lot easier, or gets you on the right track. We did have a question come in. I know it's from BC, but it sort of ties into what we're going to kind of transition into, learning about children's rights. Whether it's experience, verbal or emotional abuse from one of the parents, how to navigate that. And, Golan, maybe you can touch on how the courts, can protect children from domestic violence and, understanding the children's rights in all of this.
Yeah, thank you, Steph, for the topic. I think just to circle back to the topic that you mentioned in terms of protective measures when it comes to domestic issues. The parallel to that in what we refer to as a quasi-criminal is a peace bond application. So sometimes I mean, we're talking about the family law aspects here, so obviously restraining order is the civil aspect of the same thing, but it's also available in the criminal world. And there is the option of a peace bond application to be, determined by a justice of the peace at a local courthouse. One of the things that Jonathan mentioned also, that's another point regarding, when you make a safety plan and you're taking, deciding to take this drastic action of living, it's one thing when you live by yourself, it's another thing when you live with children. Living with children
Yeah.
brings up all sort of aspects of child abduction, priority of interest of the children, not necessarily, being rooted out of their parental relationship. This is not necessarily the case when the children themselves are being abused and you try to rescue them from the abuser, but nevertheless, it's always good to have that coupled or going parallel, hand in hand, with an authority, a judge's order to that effect. So taking the step is one thing, but you cannot just linger on and wait until something's going to be done, but rather you have to be proactive in getting the confirmation, in a sense, for the action that you have taken, whether it's with the children, whether it's other things that you have done, including taking important documents. The documents belong to both parties. All of that it can be played out differently later on. And when you want to do the right thing, you want to do it with the legal authority to do it. And that's the reason that we are encouraging, and Steph spoke earlier about bringing emotion. There is the issue of bringing it one-sided, which is looked at very, very carefully, versus giving the other side the chance to defend himself or herself, or to provide their views and the details of the circumstances of what happened and how it unfolded, etc. So everything has to be balanced with the legal rights of the person, and both parties are entitled to have rights in this context. To the aspect of children rights and measures protecting them within our court system, I just want to bring to your attention there is the Child Convention on the Right of a Child that is in international aspects of basically member states that have came together and decided that children are to be provided with a special status because of their age, because of some other aspects that they cannot defend themselves or speaks for themselves. But nevertheless, they're being afforded the idea is that the children are entitled to special care and assistance. I'm using some of the words from the convention, using protection and assistance because of they cannot fully assume responsibility within the community. Other aspects could be that they should grow up in a family environment, in an atmosphere of happiness, love, and understanding. Another comment is by the Charter of the United Nations is that they should be growing up in a spirit of peace, dignity, tolerance, freedom, etc. So you can see that this is almost a universal kind of standards that everybody agrees with, that children are to be afforded this protection. Now, when we say children, we're talking about, in this context, we're talking about children under the age of majority, which is 18 years of age. And there are few things that the court is looking for in terms of protection, other than restraining order that Steph has already spoken about, because the restraining order can be also specifically defending the children as opposed to just the adult person, or both. Other aspect that sometimes come into play is the protection agencies such as the Children Aid Society. You have other society agencies, could be the Jewish services, the Catholic services, all sort of
Indigenous as well.
indigenous, right? They all come under the same umbrella, under the same mandate of protection of children, and they have a quite, I see it quite a significant powers in terms of protection of children. And it goes not only, and Shanza mentioned the different types of abuse that one can experience, not necessarily recognizing it as such, but one of the statutes in Ontario refer to emotional harm of a child. And emotional harm of a child can come in many aspects, including removing him from a home and not letting him or her have a relationship with the other parent, and all other sort of issues that could be belittling the child and calling names, etc., etc. There's all sort of forms of abuse, but this is the mandate of these authorities, that they can act on it without a court order, without the police, without anybody involved. They can simply have they have the powers to investigate and make decisions and bring a protection application. So this is where it's kind of attached and they're rubbing into each other. The Family Law Act, the Child Services Act, all of these come together and meet in the family court in different constellations. So these are mainly the main protection aspects that one can expect when it comes to children. Of course, police is one of them. We try to, as lawyers, we don't jump to police assistance. We should be advocating towards a civil resolutions when the circumstances calls for that. But it has nothing to do with imminent threat to immediate physical harm. So that has to be that's under the mandate. Everybody has to use their judgment, but we are definitely not the one to be encouraging the use of police in disputes, inside, whether it's between spouses or between children and spouses and parents, etc. These are the main, I would say, the main authorities and measures that one can look at when looking at protecting children.
Thanks, Golan.
The Divorce Act was recently updated. Well, I guess it's not super recent, but a few years ago, to include a very detailed description of family violence and all of the kinds of things that might occur, like physical violence, sexual violence, financial violence, that kind of thing. And I think the courts and lawyers and family law professionals are more focused on that issue now as a result of that, which I think is a good thing.
Absolutely. And if you've tuned into this service or this series rather before, you'll have heard us mention what's in the best interest of the child or the children. That's often a phrase, a test that comes up. And Golan, you mentioned it too. The courts, when they're navigating these files, these cases where there's allegations of abuse, there's two sides kind of competing with one another. The courts try their best to utilize all of the services, such as the Office of the Children's Lawyer. So I know, Jonathan, maybe I know it's not sort of on our outline for today, but you have experience working as an OCL. Maybe you can touch on that kind of process and what they might consider when providing the recommendations to the court, whether it's allegations of narcissistic behavior, emotional abuse, those things that are maybe less tangible, or you're not maybe able to see it with the naked eye, like such as physical abuse.
Yeah, physical abuse is it's common. It does happen a lot, but it's and it is easier to prove if the physical abuse is discovered quickly and if it's severe enough to leave a mark. But a lot of physical abuse doesn't leave a mark and isn't reported right away. And so that really muddies the waters when it comes to that sort of thing. But in terms of how the OCL can help, or I do Section 30 assessments and Voice of the Child reports, which is the same kind of work that the OCL does, but I do it privately instead of for the OCL. So some of the things that they can do to help would be they can do what's called an investigation, or if I was doing it, I would call it a Section 30 assessment that will do a deep dive into the allegations of abuse and really, try to get to the bottom of whether or not that's actually occurring and what are the steps that need to be taken to prevent it and keep the children safe. It's always a balance between keeping the kids safe, but also having encouraging the relationship with both parents. Can you have a relationship with both parents and keep the children safe? If yes, go ahead. If not, are there things we need to put in place to keep those children safe? And that's where a Section 30 assessor or an OCL person will come in and make recommendations. Well, I think this kind of counseling will be needed. And maybe if we do supervised visits or we do supervised exchanges, or, there's all kinds of tools that they have to keep the impact of family violence minimal on children. So they can come up with recommendations to help guide the court in dealing with those cases. And then also they provide Voice of the Child reports, which is where you're, you get a professional like myself or someone who works for the OCL to interview older children, usually, 8, 9, 10 to up until teenagers, and find out from their perspective what's going on and what they want to see happen in the parenting schedule post separation. So that can be a really helpful service. And then another service that the OCL offers is to provide representation for the children in court. So they'll actually assign a lawyer to the children who will represent their interests in the adversarial process.
Thanks, Jonathan. Sorry about putting you on the spot like that, but it's definitely, those are other resources and tools at the court or even privately that can be provided. I know we had some questions coming in from audience members about, why the court might support children going with a narcissistic or abusive parent. Can a child's, whether it's in their early or late teenage years, be forced to go to an abusive parent? So those are all, what Jonathan mentioned, those are all tools that the courts may use to consider their decision on whether a child goes, if safety measures need to be implemented, and what parenting schedule, what system needs to be put in place that's going to set the children up for success and protect, like Jonathan mentioned, protect the children while also encouraging a relationship with both parents. Jonathan, I'm going to flip it back to you, maybe just to talk about reporting this, these events, domestic violence. Is there somewhere that people can turn to, what they might expect when they want to move forward in reporting it?
Yeah, for sure. And keep in mind that the vast majority of abuse goes unreported. So, no one knows exactly what percentage of abuse gets reported, but the estimates are about 25%. So 75% of abuse victims are not reporting it to the authorities. And there's a lot of complicated reasons why they might do that. They might not trust the authorities, or they may have grown up, where police or children's aid society have been a negative influence on their life and they don't trust the authorities that way. Maybe they're embarrassed. Maybe they don't believe anyone will believe them. Maybe they've been threatened and have been told, if you report this to anyone, I'm going to kill you or hurt you or take your children away from you. Or sometimes abusers will use, you mentioned this already, I think Shanza mentioned it, gaslighting, convincing the other person that they're crazy and that they're making up all the abuse allegations in their head. So there's a lot of complicated reasons why people don't report the abuse, and I haven't listed all the reasons. But if you are going to report it, I would highly recommend you get legal advice about the process by speaking to a lawyer. particularly a family lawyer who might be able to tell you how that might impact your family law case, or a criminal lawyer if criminal charges are going to be included in what you're going for. So a lawyer can give you really good advice on how to report it, who to report it to, what things you need to consider before reporting it, and what information to pass on to the authorities. I would also recommend that you reach out to a social worker or a psychotherapist or a psychologist, someone who has a background in mental health and family violence, and they know how to give you good advice on how to manage that situation safely. So reports generally, like in terms of the authorities, can be made to two organizations: the police or the child protection services, and that will look different depending on where you are, and it might also depend on who you are. For example, Golan mentioned earlier Jewish Family and Children's Services. So if you're Jewish and you're living in the GTA, that might be the people that you report to. If you're Indigenous, there's a separate Indigenous Child Protection Service. There's child protection services for Catholic people as well. So generally the two categories are the police and the child protection services. In other provinces other than Ontario, I know in British Columbia, for example, it's the Ministry of Children and Family Development or something like that. So different provinces will have different organizations to report to. So a couple things to keep in mind if you are going to report it to, your therapist or a psychologist or a doctor or someone like that, is that professionals have what's called a duty to report. So in the Child Youth Family Services Act, one of the sections is about a duty to report, meaning that if any professional finds out that there is abuse happening, they have to report it to the authorities, even if their client tells them not to. So that's where rules like confidentiality go out the window. So that's why it's really important to get advice before you report it to the authorities, to find out who to tell and how to tell in the right way to help your case and your situation, particularly if you're involved in family court. Just keep in mind, telling someone else may result in your case getting referred to the authorities, either the police or child protection, even without your consent. So for example, if someone finds out that there's an imminent risk to health or safety, so if you go into your therapist and tell them, well, my abuser said that they're on their way to abuse me or hit me or kill me or whatever, then that therapist would be required by law to report that to the authorities, to the police, because it's an immediate danger. So reporting abuse can either positively or negatively impact your family law case as well. So for example, if the court believes that you're exaggerating or making things up, then that might harm your case. But it can also help your case, because judges and lawyers, with the new Divorce Act, with the new Children's Law Reform Act in Ontario, with the relatively new Child Youth and Family Services Act, the courts and lawyers and anyone working in the system really has to consider strongly how to protect children from the family violence. So bringing it into the court case can be helpful if it's done in the right way. And that's where you would go and speak to a lawyer to get the advice on how exactly to report it in a way that will help your case. But generally, I would say err on the side of reporting it, because what sometimes happens is abuse happens, you don't report it, abuse happens, you don't report it, abuse happens, you don't report it, and then you go to court and you say, well, this abuse has been happening all along. If there's no paper trail, if there's no other organizations or agencies that have heard about the abuse, it's really your word against the other person's, and that makes it really hard to prove your case in court. But if you have a Children's Aid Society report or a police report or a psychotherapy report that says, yes, you did talk about the abuse, you did report it, that can really help your case. But again, it's a complicated world out there, and in some cases it makes a lot of sense to report it, and in some others it doesn't. And every situation has to be judged uniquely because it's going to be different than past situations. So it's really important to get advice on that. So again, go back to my recommendation: talk to a shelter worker, talk to a therapist, talk to a family lawyer, get some advice on this, talk to friends, talk to family members. Like, talking about this is really important, and people don't talk about it enough, and people get embarrassed and are ashamed that they're going through this. But really, think of this as any other problem that you might have in life. You've got an illness, you go to the doctor to get help. If you're going through family violence, it's important you get help for that as well.
Absolutely. And you sort of mentioned, both Golan, were all these different resources that may be available. I would also point out there's also Luke's Place if you're in the Durham region area. They work with women who have gone through abuse, domestic violence, whether it's physical, sexual, psychological. And they also work with women who are immersed in the family law system as well. So they may be able to help you find family law services, whether it's in Durham region or even elsewhere in the province. There's also the Barbara Scheifler
clinic. Yeah.
Yeah, that clinic. They also help women
Yeah.
who've experienced abuse. And they also, sometimes the clinic can represent some women in family court, depending on your, if you qualify. And I do believe Legal Aid Ontario as well. If you've experienced family violence and you may need legal help right away, you may be able to reach out to them. They might be able to, whether it's provide you with a certificate, or set you up with a lawyer who's would be able to assist you, or even point you in the direction of other women's shelters, community legal clinics, and other family law services. So definitely utilize those resources. We will be providing show notes to all of our attendees who join, so we'll be sure to include links and names of all these potential resources for you. So after reporting it, or kind of navigating that realm, if you are in litigation, if you are in the court process, it can be intimidating, it can be challenging to navigate family court with this history of abuse. Golan, do you mind maybe touching on some advice or some insight for that?
Yeah, thank you for that. What I would say is this is especially correct when it comes to the confidentiality issues and the embarrassment and all the things that Jonathan just mentioned in terms of why people are not doing what they should be doing in terms of protecting themselves or their children. This is where lawyers do make a difference. Firstly, lawyers are bound by confidentiality, so it's not the same as a therapist who must report having heard about an abusive situation. What we can do for a victim, let's put it that way, for the, we look at them as victims, even though there hasn't been proven. So we're gonna just use the terminology that is very common in that sense. But taking them through the court system and guiding them through the initial, let's put it, the first paperwork that need to be done, the affidavits, the going through the history of the all the history of abuse and the sort of relief that's being sought for the situation, whether it's ensuring supervision or whether it's ensuring counseling or the appointment of the children's lawyer, which is very common in a situation like that, especially when I see some comments in the Q&A. A lot of them, it's either that they all psychiatrists or psychologists because they already determined that the spouse is or having a narcissist syndrome or is some sort of a mental case of any kind. So these are the situations where either you have a parenting assessment or you have an expert report on the personality of that. If you're saying that the other party may act in a erratic behavior of some kind, but we as layperson cannot really determine that that's the personality of that other side. It's really, we have some life experiences. We know what. I do not know if anybody know what normal is anymore, but there is that range of what we consider normal, and then somebody else who's acting a bit off the tracks, and then we can either categorize him as or her as being narcissistic, being selfish in so many ways that actually causes harm to the children or to the spouse. So navigating through the legal system, it can be overwhelming. That's for sure. I mean, even for lawyers that have started the career in family can realize that the type of proceedings, from child protection to having a motion and urgent motion, case conferences, the applications, all of that can be very, very overwhelming to a person who's not only having to deal with the legal process, but also with the emotional aspects of what they've been going through before they met a lawyer to help them out in the process. So it's very important to find somebody that you can speak to, that you can trust, that you can afford, and walk you through the aspect of a whether it's a restraining order proceedings or even if it's a peace-bond proceeding that is separate from the family matter, but nevertheless may require some guidance and assistance in the preparation of an affidavit, especially to support your case. So that is, in my view, the importance of for people that go through this type of situation, to seek advice, obtain legal representation from lawyers that deal in that kind of aspects of family and protection, etc. And you use that guidance and follow the advice.
Absolutely. And it can be a very, very difficult space to navigate, both as, parties to the proceedings, counsel to the proceedings, judges deciding these proceedings. Like Jonathan mentioned, there's been some reform to our legislation, and the courts are to consider family violence, both its nature, its recency, the impact on the child, and also how to promote safety moving forward. Often, you're hearing two different interpretations, experiences of a situation. On one hand, you might have a parent who is completely adamant that it's not in the best interest of the children to have any contact with the other parent, whether it's, abuse that they experience, abuse that the children have witnessed, coercive control, financial abuse, this narcissistic behavior. The court also has to consider, on the other hand, the other parent's position. Have they gone to counseling? Are they getting better? Are there safety protocols in place to still facilitate that relationship with the child? It can be a very, very hard space to navigate, but like Golan mentioned, it's really, really important. It's definitely useful to seek legal advice, to have representation, to navigate those legal tests, those considerations that the courts will consider when making a decision, when, ordering parenting time, whether it be supervised or unsupervised. Does the court lift supervision after a certain threshold? Do they take a voice of the child's report into consideration before making those steps? So there's so many things to consider. There's so many things to navigate. So definitely reaching out to services, reaching out to a family law professional is definitely a really, really good first step. And Golan, would you be able to touch on how domestic violence might influence courts in these decisions. Is there an impact on decision-making responsibility and parenting time? Those are terminology that's a bit newer. It used to be called custody and access. But when looking at those types of decisions, how much would domestic violence in the history impact or influence those decisions?
Well, the first thing is not just the accusations. So it's really, we're talking about the findings that it has in fact taken place. So the obvious conclusion is that if somebody has been found to have a inflicted violence on a spouse, even in front of the children or on the children, that's certainly going to impact whether that parent has the ability to parent, to encourage positive parenting peacefully, acting respectfully to the, encouraging respectful relationship with the other parent. All of that is affected by the fact that he or she has inflicted violence on the children or the spouse. So once the finding is there, it's easy to kind of make the inference on limitation to the parenting, the decision making. Maybe there would be none, maybe there would be very limited, maybe it has to be with significant consultation with the other parents or with the professional. All of that, so it depends on the level of and what we're speaking of in terms of the violence, whether it's the financial violence, whether it's the emotional or physical. All of that has an impact on a decision whether that other parent can properly make decisions, given that we have found that he is being abusive, right? That's the difference between that and the allegation of one parent being abused, and therefore you should not be sharing the responsibility. But once you have that finding, it's a different story. Now it's a measure of good parenting. It's a measure of the assessment of what person is able to parent if he's using physical violence to discipline the children, for example. Should he have the children without supervision, or should she have the children without supervision if that's the methodology of raising the kids? Or, if they need to be confined to, I heard cases where they confine the children to their rooms and not letting them, letting them out or preventing them from having their food, etc. All this kind of disciplinary abusive methods that we frown upon may be acceptable in some cultures, in some some other traditions, but they're not acceptable in Ontario. And when an Ontario judge has to make a decision and he makes the findings that abusive relationship existed, it's certainly something that needs to be measured against that person's ability to parent. So either you limit his parenting altogether, or you have all sort of measures to supervise or to limit and ensure that the children and the spouse are safe from that ongoing abuse. So that's the way that I would think that this kind of violence may influence decisions of parenting responsibility for decision making.
Absolutely. And as counsel, as lawyers, we can provide our recommendation, our experiences, our guidance. But a very real and unfortunate reality is you might get two different results with two different judges. So we can do our best to ensure our client's position is strong, is heard. We're putting, safeguards in place. But the court system can be very, very tough to navigate. Absolutely. Shanza, I'm going to flip things over to you. We talked a lot about resources, for people who are maybe experiencing this and reporting it, are there any long-term support services or counseling services that people might be able to turn to find the assistance to recover, to get through, this period of their life?
Yeah, Jonathan kind of really spoke a lot about resources and therapy and the importance of kind of accessing these services when you are going through a separation and divorce with a partner who is abusive, and not just in the physical sense, but we're talking about, mental abuse, psychological abuse. And to answer your question, Steph, and some of the Q&As we got today that really talked about how partners who are abusive are damaging their relationship with the children. And, Golan talked about, litigation as a resource to kind of help with that. But I think sometimes clients can be really focused on getting justice through the court system, that they don't always utilize these other services that they should, to kind of rebuild their relationship with the children. And these services kind of go hand in hand with seeking judicial input from the judge. But at the same time, you do want to be you do want to be able to utilize these services for long-term support and long-term recovery. I mean, I think this is something that I would like to really emphasize today for some of the people who are sending Q&As today, to really, use these resources, get individual therapy. Individual therapy can really help address trauma, help develop coping strategies, and help you work through emotional and psychological issues. That can be really helpful, and you just can't stress it enough. And, if there are concerns with your children being, impacted by abuse, look at family therapy. That's an option for people, who are trying to work things out with their children, who are trying to, rebuild their relationships. So really also focus on counseling and family therapy, individual therapy, and really work on yourself and your kids to kind of build that relationship with them and strengthen that bond with them. And moving forward, you can, even if it's going to be two different households now, you can move forward and have a plan in place where you're able to maintain these relationships with your children and with your family. Jonathan also talked about, safety planning and having a safety plan in place. Stuff you talked about legal protection. So taking these appropriate steps at the right time can really build towards having that long-term plan to be able to heal and move forward, instead of just being stuck in the relationship and not taking the right actions to move forward. Another thing I think that we didn't really talk about a lot would be financial aspects of recovery. And, it's really important for people to kind of plan for that too. Maybe have an emergency financial aid, for any temporary support to cover immediate needs such as housing, food, transportation, that can really give people the security and help, especially in a stressful time when there are immediate concerns and you're trying to, extract yourself from that situation and finding long-term solutions to change your life and then kind of move forward in a safe environment where you're no longer around the abuser. And similarly, you also want to focus on long-term financial planning. Perhaps some people that can really use assistance, like, courses on budgeting, financial education, and finding employment. So you can really focus on moving forward and building that foundation for yourself to be able to become more self-sufficient moving forward.
Thank you so much, Shanza. Absolutely. So
Good
many
points.
different
Yeah.
resources, different tools. Jonathan, Golan, do you have any other maybe comments or, input for advocating for this change and really taking the step to move forward and to get the assistance that victims of domestic violence need?
Yeah, I want to emphasize that this, unfortunately, this problem is alive and well in Canada. We've done a lot of work to prevent it and to put in services to help people that are experiencing it, but the work is not done. And there's lots of organizations that you can reach out to Your women's shelter will have fundraising campaigns and need support. There's the White Ribbon campaign, which is kind of a Canada-wide attempt by men to end violence against women. You already mentioned Luke's Place and the Barbara Schliffert Clinic, which are both fantastic resources. And I don't know, Steph, if those links can be put in the show notes for people. There's also an organization called Walk a Mile in Her Shoes, which has fundraisers every year to raise money for preventing sexual violence against women. So there's lots of great work being done out there. We need more people doing that work. So if you're having that experience, I would encourage you all to reach out to one of those organizations, and let's all work together to end this problem. It's a big one.
So, Golan, any sort of final
Well,
takeaways?
I thank you for that. Thank you for the opportunity, Steph, for speaking in this webinar. I reviewed some of the comments in the Q&A, and I appreciate that people would like to have and do have some specific problems they're going through. And I encourage each and everyone to seek. We just don't have the time today to address the issues. So I suggest that anybody who does have an individual issue that he needs advice on, by all means, just seek the advice from a competent lawyer. And I'm sure that, Steph, you have your carrot there hanging in
I
front of everybody's eyes to get their 20 minutes there.
absolutely.
Yes, go ahead and do that. Otherwise, it's definitely, it's a topic that needs to be that needs to come out of the shades in a sense. It's being hidden in many cultures. It's being not being addressed properly. And the other aspect of it is that it should not be taking to be an advantage in the family litigation. It has to be completely purely for the protection, for the physical and emotional protection of the person. And I would not encourage anyone to just use it for the sake of getting their spouse out of the home, or just to gain some or to punish them one way or another, but nothing to do with the actual events that would have constitute a abusive relationship. So definitely something. It's too serious to be abused. That's what I'm trying to say here, is that sometimes there are false allegations that really ruin it for those who truly need the protection. And that's
Yeah,
that's
good
the
point.
Yeah. Well,
that's my 2 cents on this.
amazing. Well, thank you so much, Golan and Jonathan, for joining Shanza and I today. And thank you
Thanks for
for
having
all of
us.
our, yeah, 100%. It's always a pleasure to have you guys on board. And thank you to our audience for tuning in. For our Zoom attendees, following the webinar, a brief survey will appear, allowing you to share your comments and suggestions for future topics that you'd like us to explore. Your feedback is always greatly appreciated. And to grab that carrot, like Golan mentioned, we do have this opportunity that we are providing to our attendees of our after hours program for a complimentary 20-minute meeting with one of our lawyers. So please give our office a call. It's 905-655-6335. And please provide the code after hours to schedule your appointment. Please try to make sure you schedule before noon this Friday. Your appointment doesn't need to be before noon this Friday, but if you could schedule it before, we do have operators standing by to take your call and to book you in right now. We also have registration open for our next event. It is Child Inclusive Mediation involving children in the process. So to register for that, please go to russellalexander.com/familylawnow. And again, to our panelists, thank you so much for sharing your insight today. And thank you again to our audience for tuning in. And we'll hopefully see you next week for audience members.
Thanks, Steph and Shanza, and thanks for all your great comments, Golan. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Good seeing all of you again.